Raoul had been a fisherman all his life. His days started before the sun rose, long before the town even stirred awake. He lived on the edge of a small town where the houses were spread apart, and the mornings were often quiet except for the calls of birds and the soft splash of water against the shore. The lake he loved was far from the busy roads and crowded streets. It was murky and dark in parts, with reeds and bushes growing along its edges. Many locals avoided it, claiming strange things happened there, but Raoul had never paid much attention to such stories. He had always found peace in the solitude of the water. He had an old wooden boat worn by years of use, with a few scratches and a small hole patched up long ago. Each morning he would push it into the water, climb in, and start his routine. He knew the lake well, its curves, hidden rocks, and the best spots where fish like to gather. Over the years he had learned patience, the kind of patience that only comes from watching the water change with the seasons and waiting for nature to reveal its gifts. This morning was different, though. The air was thick with fog, and the surface of the lake was almost like glass, reflecting the pale light of dawn. Raoul felt a shiver run down his spine as he rode past the reeds. He shook off the feeling, blaming it on the chill. He had experienced many mornings like this and knew the lake had a way of playing tricks on the mind. The mist made shapes in the water that sometimes looked like faces or shadows moving beneath the surface. He cast his line into a familiar spot, where the water was slightly deeper, hoping for a good catch. Hours passed slowly. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water against his boat and the occasional splash of a fish jumping somewhere nearby. Raoul's patience was tested as he pulled in small fish one by one. It wasn't a day for abundance, but the peace of the lake was enough to keep him content. Then something happened that made Raoul sit up straight. He felt a tug on his line, stronger than any fish he had ever caught. At first he thought it was a particularly large fish, but the force was different. It wasn't just struggling. It felt heavy, almost like pulling a log from the water. His heart began to race. He gripped the rod tightly, planting his feet against the boat's wooden floor to brace himself. The line quivered violently, and Raoul leaned back, using all his strength to reel it in. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. Sweat formed on his forehead and his arms burned from the effort. The object on the other end didn't move like a fish. There was no darting, no splashing, only a steady, relentless weight that resisted every pull. Raoul's curiosity grew with every second. He had caught many things in his life, but nothing like this. The uncertainty both frightened and excited him. What could it be? A lost piece of furniture? Some old debris? Or something else entirely? Slowly, the object began to rise. At first, he could only see a dark shape covered in the lake's murky water. The sunlight broke through the fog in thin rays, glinting off the wet surface. As it got closer, Raoul noticed details emerging. It seemed to be a box or chest of some kind, waterlogged and covered in layers of mud, algae, and slime. The realization hit him like a shockwave. He had stumbled upon something that had been lying at the bottom of the lake for who knew how long. His hands trembled as he carefully guided the chest into the boat, making sure it didn't slip back into the water. Raoul sat back, trying to catch his breath and process what had just happened. The chest was old, heavily worn, and it had strange markings etched along its surface. Symbols and carvings he didn't recognize adorned the sides. They were faint but intricate, as if someone had taken great care to decorate it. Raoul ran his fingers over the markings, wondering who had made it and why it was hidden at the bottom of the lake. The mystery gnawed at him. He had never been one for superstition, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that this chest was unusual, important, and perhaps dangerous. He looked around the lake. The fog was beginning to lift, revealing the familiar landscape of reeds, old trees, and the quiet banks. For a moment, everything seemed normal again, but the weight of the chest reminded him that something extraordinary had occurred. Raoul's mind raced. Should he open it here on the boat with no one around, or should he take it back to his cabin, where he could study it more carefully? He chose the latter, wanting to keep it safe and away from prying eyes. The row back to shore was slow. Raoul kept checking the chest, making sure it didn't shift and tip over. His old boat creaked and groaned under the unexpected load. When he finally reached the dock, he carefully lifted it onto the wooden planks, feeling the relief of solid ground beneath his feet. He stood there for a moment, looking at the chest and thinking about the possibilities. Whoever had hidden it and for what reason he could only guess. The town had its share of old stories, some about lost treasures, others about accidents or disappearances near the lake. But he never imagined he would be part of one of those stories. Raoul spent the evening staring at the chest, unable to resist its pull on his curiosity. The lamp on his small wooden table cast soft flickering light on the intricate carvings that adorned its sides. Each symbol seemed strange and foreign, yet familiar in a way he couldn't explain. He ran his fingers over the rough surface, brushing off dried mud and algae, imagining the hands that had once held it. It had clearly been hidden carefully, submerged under the murky waters of the lake for decades, maybe longer. Raoul's mind raced with possibilities. Who had owned this chest? What secrets had they wanted to keep hidden so badly that it had ended up at the bottom of the lake? He decided to examine it more closely before attempting to open it. The lock at the center was old and rusted, but it was sturdy. He inspected it carefully, seeing the layers of corrosion and imagining the years it had spent submerged in the water. He took a few small tools from his workbench, a pair of pliers, a tiny screwdriver, and an old knife. He gently tried to jiggle the lock, hoping it might give way without damaging the chest. It didn't budge. Raoul took a step back and breathed deeply. Patience had always served him well. He decided he would need to find the right way to open it without breaking anything inside. Raoul's mind wandered back to the lake, to the moment when he had first pulled the chest from the water. He remembered the weight, the way it had resisted every pull, and the strange sense that it was alive with some kind of history. He wondered about the family or person who had hidden it there. The town had always been small, filled with stories of people coming and going, some never to be seen again. Could this chest be connected to one of those stories? Perhaps a family trying to keep something safe during difficult times? Raoul couldn't know yet, but the thought made him more determined to uncover the truth. He decided to set the chest on a sturdy part of the floor and approach it systematically. Raoul was methodical by nature. He cleaned the surface, wiped away grime, and inspected every inch. The corners were reinforced with metal strips, also rusted, and the wood beneath was dark and thick. It was built to last, to survive harsh conditions, and the lake had certainly tested it. Raoul marveled at the craftsmanship. Whoever had made it had wanted it to endure time and water, protecting whatever lay inside. Hours passed as Raoul worked quietly. He tried small movements with the lock, tapping it lightly, listening to the sound it made. He didn't rush, aware that hasty actions could ruin the contents. Every time he thought about opening it, a mixture of excitement and fear washed over him. This chest was more than just an old container. It was a piece of history, and he felt honored to be the one who found it. He imagined the stories it could tell, lives, struggles, secrets, and maybe even treasures lost long ago. Finally, after much patience, Raoul found a weak spot in the lock. With a careful twist and a slight nudge, he felt it give way. His heart raced as he lifted the lid slowly, half expecting a sudden gush of water or some unexpected trap. Instead, he found silence and stillness. The inside was filled with a thick layer of mud and debris, a smell of earth and water clinging to everything. Raoul's fingers brushed against papers, small objects, and something carved, dense and solid. He carefully pulled out the items one by one, brushing off the layers of dirt. Among the first things he noticed were old documents. They were fragile, yellowed with age, edges frayed and some torn. Raoul handled them carefully, spreading them on his table to examine the writing. The script was faded but still legible. They appeared to be letters, diaries, and legal papers. His eyes widened as he realized they belonged to a family that had lived near the lake decades ago. The papers spoke of daily life, hopes, struggles, and hints of conflict. There were mentions of money hidden away, disagreements with neighbors, and even references to people who had disappeared mysteriously. Raoul felt as though he was holding pieces of someone's life, glimpses into events that the town had forgotten. Among the papers were photographs. Raoul picked them up gingerly, recognizing faces he had seen only in old town stories or in passing mentions by older residents. Some were group portraits, smiling families standing proudly by their homes. Others were snapshots of individuals, serious and contemplative, as if they were aware that life could be unpredictable and fleeting. Raoul examined each photograph carefully, trying to connect the dots between the people in the pictures and the notes he had read. The more he looked, the more he felt the weight of the past settling in his hands. The next morning, Raoul woke with a sense of purpose. The chest had settled in the corner of his cabin, but it seemed to call to him with silent urgency. He brewed a simple cup of coffee and sat at his table, gazing at the mysterious box and its contents. His mind replayed the details from the night before, the documents, photographs, and the carved statue. Each item seemed to whisper fragments of stories he could almost hear but not yet fully understand. He realized that the chest was not just a container of old items. It was a bridge to the past, a portal into lives that had been long forgotten. Raoul decided to start with the documents. He carefully spread them out on the table, grouping similar papers together. Some were letters written in careful, neat handwriting. Others were diaries, pages filled with personal reflections, worries, and hopes. As he read, he began to piece together a story of a family who had lived on the edge of the lake, facing struggles with neighbors, the town, and circumstances beyond their control. There were references to disputes over land, financial troubles, and mysterious disappearances. Raoul could feel the emotions behind the words, the fear, the frustration, and the quiet resilience of people trying to protect what was theirs. The letters caught his attention first. They seemed to be between family members, some written in secrecy. One in particular described the decision to hide something valuable in the lake, fearing that if it stayed on land, it would be taken or destroyed. The words were cautious, almost urgent, hinting at a family secret that was meant to be preserved for generations. Raoul felt a chill as he realized the chest he had found was part of that secret. He wondered what the family would think if they could see it now, brought to light decades later by his hands. Next, he turned to the photographs. They were fragile, the edges curling and colors faded, but the images spoke clearly. Families posed in front of modest homes, smiles on their faces, eyes that held both hope and worry. One photograph showed a group of children playing near the edge of the lake, the same lake where Raoul had discovered the chest. It was eerie to see the place so familiar yet frozen in time. He traced the faces with his fingers, trying to imagine their lives, their stories, and what had led them to hide their belongings beneath the water. Raoul felt a deep connection to them, as though the chest had chosen him to carry their story forward. The carved statue lay beside the papers, its presence almost commanding. Raoul picked it up again, feeling the smoothness of the wood and the careful precision of the carving. It depicted a figure holding something close, perhaps a child or a symbol of protection. Raoul couldn't be sure, but the emotion carved into the statue was unmistakable. It radiated a sense of care, of guarding something precious. The more he held it, the more he felt a subtle energy, a quiet reminder of the lives intertwined with this object. He realized that the chest was more than just history. It carried the weight of memory and intention. Determined to understand more, Raoul decided to visit the local historian in town. The historian, an older man with a deep knowledge of the area's past, welcomed Raoul warmly and listened intently as he described the discovery. Raoul showed him the photographs and documents, careful with the delicate pages. The historian's eyes widened as he examined the items. He recognized some of the names and places mentioned in the papers, recalling stories passed down from previous generations. Together they began to piece together a narrative of the family, their struggles and the reasons why such a chest might have been hidden. The historian explained that the family had been prominent in the area long ago, but had vanished under mysterious circumstances. There were rumors of disagreements with neighbors, lost fortunes, and even hints of danger from outside forces. The chest, with its documents and carvings, might have been a way to protect what was theirs, a safeguard against the uncertainties of life. Raoul listened, fascinated, as the historian recounted tales of the town's past, connecting the fragments in the chest to the broader history he knew. The pieces of the puzzle slowly began to form a picture, though many details remained elusive. Back at his cabin, Raoul felt a mix of excitement and responsibility. He knew that the chest's contents were not just relics. They were part of the family's legacy. He wanted to honor their story, to understand it fully, and to ensure that it was preserved. He spent hours transcribing the documents, making notes about the photographs and sketching the carvings on the statue. Each task drew him deeper into the lives of the people who had left these items behind. The process was slow and meticulous, but Raoul didn't mind. It was a journey into history, a chance to connect with lives that had faded into memory. As the days passed, Raoul became increasingly aware of the chest's presence in his life. It influenced his thoughts, his routines, and even his dreams. At night, he imagined the lake, the family, and the moments that had led to the chest being hidden. Sometimes he thought he saw glimpses of movement near the water's edge, shadows that seemed to belong to another time. The experiences were subtle, almost imperceptible, but they reinforced the feeling that he was part of a larger story, one that had been waiting for him to uncover it. Raoul also began to notice the reactions of others in the town. Word of the discovery spread slowly, carried by whispers and quiet conversations. Some people were curious, intrigued by the mystery, while others were cautious, hesitant to get involved. Raoul was careful to share only what was necessary, protecting both the chest and the integrity of the story it contained. He realized that the past could be fragile, and that some secrets required discretion to preserve their meaning. Throughout this process, Raoul found a sense of purpose that went beyond his daily life as a fisherman. The chest had introduced him to a story that demanded attention, patience, and respect. It had challenged him to look beyond the surface, to engage with history in a way he had never experienced before. Each document, photograph, and carved item revealed layers of human experience, reminding him of the resilience, hope, and complexity of life. Raoul felt honored to be a part of this journey, to hold in his hands the tangible traces of lives that had otherwise been forgotten. By the end of the week, Raoul had made over the next few days, Raoul noticed the small town beginning to change in subtle ways. Though he had shared the discovery of the chest with only a few trusted people, word seemed to travel quickly. Some neighbors came by, curious, asking questions about the chest and what it contained. Raoul answered carefully, giving only what was necessary, not wanting to reveal too much. He could sense the mix of excitement, curiosity, and even envy in their eyes. It was clear that the discovery had stirred more than just his own interest. It had awakened something in the town, something that had been quiet for decades. Raoul kept to his routine, going out to the lake in the early mornings, tending to his nets and lines, but his mind was often elsewhere. The chest, its contents, and the stories within it occupied his thoughts constantly. Sometimes when he was rowing the boat across the calm water, he felt as if eyes were watching him from the foggy edges of the lake. Shadows moved in ways that didn't belong to the reeds or the trees. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make him pause and listen. He shook off the feeling, telling himself it was his imagination, yet he could not ignore the strange sense that the chest's discovery had stirred something more in the world around him. Back in his cabin, Raoul continued to study the documents, photographs, and the carved statue. The historian he had visited earlier had provided some additional context about the family, confirming that they had been significant in the town many years ago, but had vanished suddenly under circumstances that had never been fully explained. Raoul noticed patterns in the documents, hints that the family might have had knowledge of hidden treasures or other secrets connected to the town's history. The letters and diaries suggested that certain events had forced them to hide these items, perhaps to keep them safe from people who might have wanted them for personal gain. As Raoul delved deeper, he realized the chest had drawn more attention than he had anticipated. On several occasions, strangers lingered near the edges of his property, appearing to watch the cabin or the lake. Raoul remained cautious, making sure the chest was always secure. He felt a growing responsibility, not just for the chest itself, but for the history and stories it contained. He could not allow it to fall into the wrong hands, or for its significance to be distorted or forgotten. Each night, as he closed the cabin door and checked the chest, he felt the weight of that responsibility pressing on him, reminding him that some secrets were delicate and required care. One morning, while preparing to row across the lake, Raoul noticed unusual ripples on the surface, though the water was otherwise calm. The movement seemed deliberate, like something moving beneath and not like fish or normal currents. He paused, gripping the boat tightly, scanning the foggy edges of the lake. For a moment he felt a deep unease. He had spent years on this water and knew its moods well. This was different. It was as if the lake itself was reacting to the chest, to its removal from the depths and to the attention it had attracted. Raoul felt a shiver run down his spine but pressed on, knowing that understanding. This mystery required courage and patience. The historian suggested they look into old town records, property deeds, and family histories to see if they could trace more about the people connected to the chest. Raoul agreed, feeling that this was the next step in uncovering the story. They spent long hours poring over dusty ledgers, old newspapers, and archived letters, finding connections and clues that had been lost over time. They discovered hints of land disputes, financial difficulties, and relationships with other families in the town. Some of the documents suggested that the family had hidden not just this chest, but possibly other items in different locations, perhaps as a safeguard against misfortune or danger. Raoul's curiosity grew with every new piece of information, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the town slowly became aware of the chest's discovery, more people approached Raoul with offers of help, advice, or curiosity. He met journalists, historians, and treasure hunters, each with their own motivations. Some were genuinely interested in preserving history, while others were driven by the hope of uncovering wealth or secrets. Raoul navigated these interactions carefully, protecting the chest and the story it contained. He realized that the human element was as important as the history itself. The chest was a story of people, of their lives, and it required respect and sensitivity. In the evenings, Raoul often returned to his cabin and sat by the lamp, examining the chest and its contents again. He found that each time he looked, he noticed details he had missed before. The documents contained subtle clues about relationships, places, and events. The photographs revealed expressions and gestures that told more than the written words. The statue seemed to convey emotions that connected all the pieces together, as if it held the essence of the family's experience. Raoul felt a deepening connection to these lives, a responsibility to understand and preserve their story with integrity. Despite the growing attention and occasional unease, Raoul found moments of calm and reflection. He would sit by the lake at dawn, watching the mist roll over the water, listening to the soft sounds of nature, and thinking about the family who had hidden the chest. He imagined their struggles, their hopes, and the difficult choices they had made to protect what was important to them. The lake had always been a place of peace for Raoul, but now it also represented history, memory, and the fragile intersection of past and present. He understood that his role was not simply to discover the chest, but to engage with its story thoughtfully. To honor the Raoul awoke before dawn, as he always did, but today he felt a deeper sense of purpose. The chest had been in his cabin for weeks now, and while he had learned much about its contents, he knew that the final chapter of this journey was still ahead. He had spent countless hours examining the documents, photographs, and the carved statue, piecing together the story of the family that had once lived near the lake. Now Raoul felt that he needed to return the chest to the lake, to the place where it belonged, but in a way that preserved its secrets and honored the lives it represented. He packed the chest carefully in his boat, making sure the fragile documents and carved statue were secured. The lake was calm that morning, the surface smooth like glass reflecting the first pale rays of the sun. Raoul rowed slowly toward the deeper part of the lake where he had first discovered the chest. His mind wandered as he approached the spot, thinking of the family, their struggles, and the decisions that had led them to hide their belongings beneath the water so many years ago. He felt a connection to them, as if he was completing a task they had begun long ago, safeguarding their story until the right moment. The water was silent, except for the gentle splash of the oars. Raoul's heart pounded in his chest as he neared the location. He had prepared carefully, creating a map of where the chest would rest, marking it subtly with a stone cairn on the shore to serve as a reference, yet keeping it discreet so that no one else would disturb it. He wanted to ensure that the chest remained safe and undisturbed, a testament to the past and a bridge to the present. As he lowered it into the water, he felt the familiar resistance, the weight of history pulling him into the moment. He watched as it slowly sank, finally resting on the muddy bottom of the lake, hidden from view but preserved. Raoul remained on the boat for a while, watching the water settle. He felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, a satisfaction that came from doing the right thing rather than seeking fame or fortune. The chest was no longer just an object. It was a story, a memory, and a connection between generations. By returning it to the lake, Raoul ensured that the family's history remained protected, a secret held carefully by time and nature. He touched the water gently, feeling a final bond with the lake and the story it now held. When he returned to the shore, Raoul felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. The lake was calm, serene, and almost ordinary again, yet he knew it now held a profound story beneath its surface. He walked back to his cabin slowly, reflecting on the journey he had undertaken. The chest had changed him, opening his eyes to the depth of history, the importance of memory and the responsibility that comes with discovery. It had also reminded him that some treasures are not meant for personal gain, but for preservation and respect. Over the next days, life returned to a quieter rhythm. Raoul continued his fishing routines, rowing across the lake, checking his nets, and enjoying the peace of the early mornings. Yet he carried with him the lessons from the chest, the understanding of lives long past, the empathy for people whose stories had almost been lost, and the respect for the delicate balance between curiosity and responsibility. Occasionally he thought of the chest resting in the lake, secure and hidden, a silent testament to a family's endurance and care. People in the town noticed a change in Raoul. He seemed more reflective, calmer, and more connected to his surroundings. Some asked him about the chest, but he shared only that he had returned it to the lake, protecting it as it was meant to be. The mystery remained whispered among neighbors and local historians, a story of discovery, respect, and preservation. Raoul did not seek recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing he had done the right thing, and that the history he uncovered would remain intact for future generations. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, painting the water in hues of gold and orange, Raoul sat on the shore, watching the reflections ripple across the surface. He felt a deep sense of peace. The chest, now hidden beneath the calm waters, carried with it a story that had endured time, secrecy, and the unpredictability of human life. Raoul understood that his role had been significant yet quiet. He had become a guardian of history, bridging the past and the present, and preserving a story that would continue to live even if unseen. In the following weeks, Raoul shared what he had learned with a few trusted historians and friends, focusing on the historical and human aspects of the discovery, rather than the treasure itself. The documents and photographs that he had copied and preserved served as a record of the family's life, struggles, and resilience. The carved statue, while no longer physically in his hands, remained vivid in his memory, a symbol of protection, care, and the enduring human spirit. Raoul felt proud of what he had accomplished, knowing that he had honored the intentions of the family who had hidden the chest and had ensured that their story would not be lost to time. As time passed, the lake returned to its familiar calmness, its surface reflecting the seasons, the weather, and the quiet life of the town. Raoul continued to fish, to wake before dawn, and to enjoy the solitude of the water. Yet he knew that he had been part of something extraordinary. The chest had brought mystery, history, and meaning into his life. It had reminded him that the simplest actions, care, patience, and respect, can have profound impacts, preserving stories that might otherwise be forgotten. Raoul often thought about the family, imagining their lives, their challenges, and their hopes. He felt connected to them even across decades. Their story had become a part of him, influencing how he viewed history, memory, and human experience. The lake, once a place of routine work and quiet reflection, had transformed into a sacred space of connection, mystery, and remembrance. Raoul understood that he had been entrusted with a rare opportunity, and he carried that trust with him in every action he took, every thought he had, and every morning he spent on the water. Though he never sought attention or reward, Raoul knew that his experience with the chest would remain a defining part of his life. The discovery, the study, and the careful return of the chest had changed him, deepened his understanding of human resilience, and strengthened his sense of purpose. The lake, with its calm surface and hidden depths, would always hold the memory of the chest, the family, and the story he had uncovered. Raoul felt a quiet gratitude for having been chosen to play a part in this journey, knowing that he had honored the past, preserved history, and connected with lives that had long since faded into memory. Years later, when Raoul reflected on that time, he remembered the moments with clarity. The struggle to pull the chest from the murky lake, the meticulous examination of its contents, the research and study, and finally, the careful return to its resting place. He thought of the photographs, the letters, the carved statue, and the fragile notes each carrying pieces of a life once lived. He realized that the journey had not been about finding treasure or gaining recognition, but about understanding, respecting, and preserving the human stories that shape our world. Raoul knew that the lake, the chest, and the lives connected to it would remain a quiet legend, a testament to patience, care, and the enduring power of history, as it represented, and to ensure that the history it contained was not lost again. One evening, While sorting through the chest once more, Raoul noticed something new, a small piece of paper tucked behind the carved statue. It was faded and fragile, almost hidden, but the writing was still legible. It contained a message written in careful script, hinting at the importance of the items and their protection. The note suggested that the family had hoped someone would one day find the chest and understand its significance, but it also warned of potential consequences if the story was misused or misunderstood. Raoul felt a chill as he read the words, realizing that the chest was not just an artifact but a carefully preserved part of a family's life and legacy. The discovery of the note strengthened Raoul's resolve. He knew that he had to approach the situation with care, patience, and respect. He continued his research, making notes, organizing the documents, and recording observations about the photographs and statue. Each day brought new insights and a deeper understanding of the family's story. Raoul began to see connections between the past and the present, understanding that the chest's significance extended beyond mere curiosity or treasure. It was a testament to human resilience, memory, and the desire to protect what is meaningful. As the days turned into weeks, Raoul felt a growing sense of purpose and connection. The chest had transformed his life, drawing him into a story that spanned generations. He knew that uncovering the full truth would take time and effort, but he was committed to the journey. He had become not just a fisherman who discovered a chest, but a guardian of history, entrusted with the preservation of lives that had long been forgotten. The lake, once a place of quiet routine, had become a portal to the past, a reminder of the complexity of human life, and a symbol of the responsibilities that come with discovery. Raoul's nights were filled with contemplation, thinking about the family, the town, and the choices that had led to the chest being hidden. He reflected on his own life, the routines that had once defined him, and the new purpose that had emerged. The chest was a reminder that history is alive, that stories endure, and that some discoveries carry responsibilities that extend beyond curiosity or personal gain. Raoul felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had been chosen to uncover this story, to engage with it thoughtfully, and to honor the legacy of those who had entrusted him with it. In the quiet of his cabin, with the chest close by, Raoul understood that the journey was far from over. There were more questions to answer, more connections to uncover, and more stories to preserve. Yet he also felt a sense of calm and determination. The chest had brought mystery, challenge, and purpose into his life, and he was ready to continue the exploration with patience, respect, and care. The lake outside reflected the moonlight, calm and silent, holding its secrets beneath the surface. Raoul sat by the lamp, feeling the weight of history in his hands, aware that he was part of a story that transcended time, connecting past and present in a way he had never experienced before. Significant progress. He had organized the documents, identified several individuals in the photographs, and made detailed notes on the statue and carvings. He had begun to form theories about the family's motivations, the circumstances that led to the chest being submerged, and the broader historical context. Yet despite all this, questions remained. There were gaps in the story, missing pieces that required further investigation. Raoul knew that uncovering the full truth would take time, patience, and perhaps even a willingness to accept that some mysteries might never be solved. Sitting by the window of his cabin, looking out at the lake, Raoul felt a profound connection to the past. The water, which had always been a source of peace and livelihood, now held a deeper significance. It was a place where history had been hidden, waiting for the right person to uncover it. Raoul understood that his role was not just to discover the chest, but to engage with it thoughtfully, to honor the lives it represented, and to ensure that the stories it contained were not lost again. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that he had become part of a larger narrative, one that bridged the past and the present, the living and the remembered. As night fell, Raoul carefully returned the documents and photographs to the chest, placing the carved statue on top. He closed the lid gently, feeling the weight of history in his hands. He knew that tomorrow would bring more work, more discoveries, and perhaps more challenges, but he was ready. The chest had changed his perspective, enriched his understanding, and deepened his connection to the world around him. Raoul sat back, letting the quiet of the cabin and the lake settle around him, aware that he was part of a story that transcended time, a story that had waited patiently for someone to uncover it and carry it forward. Then there was the carved object, small but heavy. It was a statue, intricate in its details, depicting a figure he couldn't immediately identify. The wood was dark, worn smooth in places, and the carving was precise, suggesting a skilled hand. Raoul felt a strange energy radiating from it, a warmth that contrasted with the chill from the lake. It was as if the statue carried memories, emotions, or a story that words alone could not convey. He held it carefully, turning it in his hands, noticing every line and curve. Questions filled his mind. Why had this been hidden? What had been so important that it needed protection underwater? The evening deepened, shadows filling the cabin as Raoul examined the contents. He felt a connection to the family who had left these items behind. Their lives, preserved in documents and photographs, seemed to reach across time to him, telling him stories of hope, fear, and survival. Raoul wondered about the circumstances that had led to the chest being submerged. Had it been an accident, or had someone deliberately hidden it to keep it safe from harm? The thought made him more determined to understand its history. He carefully organized the items on his table, grouping papers, photographs, and small objects together. Raoul knew that understanding the chest's story would take time. He decided to document everything he could, taking notes on each item, describing the photographs and making sketches of the carvings on the statue. It was work that required patience, but Raoul didn't mind. He felt a sense of responsibility to preserve the history he had uncovered, to honor the lives of those who had once owned this chest. Late into the night, Raoul leaned back in his chair, exhausted but deeply absorbed in thought. The chest had changed the quiet routine of his life, bringing mystery and history into his hands. He imagined the family it had belonged to, the lives they had lived, and the secrets they had carried with them. Sleep was difficult that night, as his mind continued to weave together the fragments of the past he now held. Each memory in the chest seemed alive, whispering stories and urging him to uncover more. Before finally resting, Raoul made a decision. He would not rush the process. He would research the symbols, try to trace the family in the documents, and seek out anyone in town who might remember their story. The chest had given him a rare gift, the chance to connect with history in a way few people ever would. Raoul felt a mix of awe and responsibility. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that opening the chest was only the beginning of a journey that would take him deep into the mysteries of the lake, the town, and the lives of those who had come before him. He placed the statue and documents carefully back into the chest, closing the lid gently for the night, ready to continue the exploration in the days to come. Raoul's cabin was small but cozy, with a wooden table by the window and a fire always ready in the hearth. He set the chest down carefully, brushing off some of the mud and slime. He examined the carvings again more closely this time. Each line and curve seemed deliberate, and the craftsmanship hinted at a skill that belonged to someone who had devoted time and care to their work. Raoul's mind wandered to the people who might have made it, imagining scenes of families, secret meetings, or someone fleeing and hiding their possessions. He decided to rest for a moment, sitting on his chair and staring at the chest. The sun was higher now, casting golden light into the cabin. The warm light did little to calm the nervous excitement in his chest. He thought about the stories he had heard about the lake, the warnings from locals, and even the strange feelings he sometimes had when alone on the water. Now all of that seemed connected to this moment. He wondered what would happen if he opened it, what he might find, and whether it was safe to do so. Raoul was a man of patience, and he knew that rushing into things often led to mistakes. He decided to wait until the evening when the cabin was quiet and he could focus without distractions. He made himself a simple lunch, but he barely tasted it. His mind kept returning to the chest and the strange symbols carved on its surface. Each line seemed to whisper questions that he did not have answers to yet. He spent the afternoon inspecting his tools, preparing for the effort it might take to open the chest. He had old pliers, a hammer, and even a small,